Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Recently, we have honored our veterans across this country with Veterans Day, and on that day, or actually Friday, the day before, we had a special program at North Idaho College in which we invited veterans from World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam to be on our campus. And while they were here, we did this program that we are now airing by tape to you. I would like to introduce our honored guest today. To my far left is Linda Powers, who served in the United States Air Force and discusses disabled veterans. And next to her is Dr. Clifford Musgrove, who served in World War II and particularly in Germany, and he will have some things to say about that experience. And next to him is Jerry Engelbrecht, who served in the service for 20 years and was involved in more than one exercise, and he has great interest in the MIA issue, and we'll be discussing that. And next to him is Al Harflinger, who was a combat veteran from Vietnam, and we'll be discussing the Vietnam era with him. And next to me is John Smith, who also served in the Navy in Vietnam, and we'll be discussing his experiences. I welcome all of you to our program, and may I say in front of our viewing audience, which covers a large area, that we wish to honor you today. We wish to thank you for what you have done for our country. In doing that, I also want to thank Jean Robeson, who's a citizen here in Kootenai County that many of you have worked with, and without her assistance, I don't think I would have been able to get all of you together. We appreciate that very much. My first question is to Linda Powers, and then I will invite the rest of you to respond to that too. We have holidays and we go through those, and many times we take the day off and we don't think of the purpose of why we have it. We just simply take the day off, and I think that I could honor you most by giving you the opportunity to tell our viewers what does Veterans Day and the whole issue of our country and veterans means to you. And Linda, may I start with you?
Veterans Day to me is a time of memory. I remember my friends that I lost. I remember my grandfather, people that kept this country free from me, which is the same thing I tried to do for my children, and now my daughter's in the service, and it's just honoring veterans.
And your family, through what you're telling me, they've, for a number of generations, have served the country and defended the country.
Yes, my grandfather, my father. I had a sister in the Marine Corps, 2 brothers in the Army, a brother in the Navy. I was in the Air Force, and my daughter's in the Air Force now.
Thank you. Clifford, may we ask you?
Well, Veterans Day has a series of meanings to me. Having been in World War II, and then participating in the problems of Vietnam and Korea, many mixed emotions, and yet great respect for everyone that served in our armed forces. Now, not everyone could. It was a little difficult for me when I first realized as a combat chaplain that I figured everyone should be in uniform, everyone should be in service. I learned that it takes 5 behind the scenes to keep 1 man on the front lines. So I've grown to respect people who have stood together and embraced political cause, a national cause, and an international cause. And to me, it's very important in this day in which we live.
Also, Clifford, do I hear you saying that in addition to honoring the veterans who have served in the armed forces for many, many years in this country, that you are recognizing those who are behind the scenes that have been supportive?
Yes, I have a great admiration for those who gave of themselves as much as they possibly could to make it possible for we who were in the front lines to be there.
Thank you. Jerry?
I have basically the same feeling. I've come from a family of veterans. Most of them served in the military. Although, like the doctor was saying, my father didn't serve, but physically he wasn't able to, so he stayed back and he did things that needed to be done on the home front. So I don't want anybody to feel that they haven't served to feel that they are in inferiority, because not all people can serve because of maybe health or whatever, or religion. But I'm proud to have been a veteran of all the years that I've served my country. And I'm just proud to be an American.
Thank you very much. Al?
I have the same sentiments as the other two gentlemen. I was on the front lines. I was with the 1st and 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam in 68 through 70. And if it wasn't for the support of the convoys and the ships and the supplies and stuff, I'd be dead right now. Yes, at certain times I'm a little bitter because I'm up to my fanny in mud and these guys are taking showers. Yeah, there's a little resentment. But all in all, you're correct. If it wasn't for us all, none of us would have, I meant the front guys out in front would have had it a lot worse. And on today, I'm very proud because I did what I was supposed to do. This is the United States of America. I chose to live here. There's a lot of other countries that I can give up my citizenship and go move to, but I've seen other countries, I've seen other places, and the way I see it, this is the best going for us. And if my country asked me to go to Honduras tomorrow to fight some silly drug war, well, fine, I'll go fight it. I mean, that's, because I live here, that's my obligation. It's just, to me, this is family. If your mom or dad asked you to do something, you usually did it without question. And that's how I feel about my country. This is my family. This is where I live.
Thank you. John?
Well, Veterans Day to myself has many mixed emotions. Being past commander of the American Legion in Coeur d'Alene and the VFW in Coeur d'Alene, I've met hundreds and hundreds of veterans with different explanations and feelings on Veterans Day. But I guess what sums it up is when you think of all the past wars that we've had, all the way from the Spanish-American War, the Philippines problems and everything else, that we can look back now and see what has been done and wonder and stand and think, did they really think that that was going to be the end? What could they do to make things better? And I sit there on Veterans Day at Independence Point or in the cemetery, and I look at the rows and rows of tombstones, all looking the same, and just thanking God that I'm alive to pay tribute to the ones that went before me, and thanking the ones that kept this country free in the meantime.
I think you 5 people have really given us the real meaning of Veterans Day, and I appreciate that very much. I want to talk about some things that happened in the different wars. When I realized that we had a very special guest today at our lecture series when we were taping this program. It was 90 years old in World War I. He's not with us this afternoon, and we also don't have represented the Korean War, but we're not. We are recognizing those roles too. But I'd like to start with Dr. Clifford Musgrove, and let's talk about World War II. That's received an awful lot of attention, of course. It was the most destructive time in the history of the world, and we have a lot of movies and books and so forth, but you had a very personal experience, and I guess what I'd like to invite you to do, Dr. Musgrove, is to talk about your personal experience. I know you were captured in Germany, and you visited a concentration camp, and you went through some terrible things. And I particularly am addressing you with this question because there's what we call revisions of history. They're sending out untruths today in our country that it didn't happen. And I just want to invite you to take a little time to tell the viewers about the war and how terrible it was when there was a dictatorial society that controlled people that way and killed them.
Well, when you start reminiscing and recalling experiences, I remember full well, I believe, the day that we landed in Omaha Beach in the second assault. And from there across France and Belgium, we were with the ground forces, the collapse of the Ruhr pocket, and there about 17,000 prisoners were taken by our forces. General Rose, by the way, was killed at that particular time. And then we moved there to cross the Ruhr River, and many of us were taken and held for a number of days. A lot of our fellows that were in our outfit, we were known actually at that time as 99th Battle Babies. They brought us from the United States, put us immediately in combat, and we were in the front lines from the day we landed until the war ended, when we were down in Czechoslovakia to meet the Russians. But at the Ruhr pocket, many of the people, our fellows, were captured, and we were part of that group. Later on, we were released from up in the northern countries, almost into Latvia and Estonia, that part of the country, and we were sent back to our troops on train or walking. Many of us lost 50 to 60 pounds, and we lived on potatoes and potato peelings a good deal of the time. But then when we returned to our outfits, we were continued in our movement right straight on through to the Battle of the Bulge. In fact, I've been known, and it's a documented historical fact, as the first chaplain to serve communion east of the Rhine River at the Remagen Bridge. And in fact, we crossed the bridge under shell fire, and the bridge was rocking at the time, and we didn't even know it was the Rhine River.
Yeah.
Until the next day.
And we have such little time with the TV program. I wish we had a lot more time, but we should also take a minute to once again set the record straight that you, as an eyewitness to the atrocities of the Holocaust and the concentration camps.
Now, when they talk about these things actually not happening, I was there and have photographs of having had pictures taken at Dachau, especially, because that's the most famous one, to my knowledge. And I was there at the concentration camp, and especially when the fires were dying down and they bulldozed bodies out of the big furnace areas, big slit trenches that we carried the ashes of hundreds and thousands of people. So when they talk about the Holocaust and not existing, most of us who were in that area can affirm the fact that it actually happened.
Thank you very much. Al, I want to talk a little bit about Vietnam, and you were in combat, and you had a lot of experiences from that very difficult war. And would you take a minute to tell our viewers some of your reactions? I know you and I have had some conversation about returning home for you was a different experience than for Dr. Musgrove or others in World War II. Would you just share that with us?
Well, when I was in Vietnam, when I first went over, I enlisted. I thought that was the correct thing to do. And in Vietnam we had a saying, if you lived the first month and the last month, you'd make it home. If you made it past the first month and you're 9 months in between, or you're 10 months in between, it was, you had it pretty well made. It was either first coming in and being so green you didn't know what was happening and you got killed, or at the end you were too cautious and you got killed. Well, I thought we did real good. I mean, all the guys that came on the plane with me, we were just rip-roaring happy to be home. And when we got home, we got treated like we were dog poop. I didn't understand. My whole country seemed to be split down the middle. Half the country was patting me on the back while the other one was trying to shove their size 8 up my fanny. And I didn't understand why. I had done nothing wrong to these individuals. I had maybe made a few misjudgments in Vietnam, but that's the casualties of war. I didn't understand the hippies, the protests. I'm glad they did it. Today I am, because they did help stop a war that didn't really need to be there. But the war traumatized me real well. When I hit Vietnam, I was only 18. And 18, that's a senior in high school. Before I was 18 and a half, I had already lost my 3 best friends. And it's the only friends I've ever had. One got cooked alive, one's you couldn't find enough pieces of to send him home, and the other one had a chest wound that you don't want me to describe. Now, ever since then, I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which means I can turn on and off my emotions very fast. And the war did that to me. What made it even more complex is I came home to a place that was just as screwed up as I was. It was like being a battered child. Mom and Dad didn't really know what to do with me. I mean, half the government was my mom and the other half was my dad, and Mom saying, "Don't beat the kid," but yet I'm still getting beat. It took almost 20 years before I came out of the woodwork. And since I've came out, you're not going to shut me up. I'm going to let the world know that we have some problems. And there's nothing wrong. And if I can get this message across to any young kid that's from 16 to 25, there's nothing wrong with asking why. And if I had it to do over again, I would sure ask why.
Thank you very much. Jerry, I know that you indicated to me that 1971 is the year that you became involved in this issue, and there are some issues that go with one through their life, and now you've for 18 years been concerned about the POWs, MIAs, and I know you've been in a lot of parades with your float to make this point, and you're very concerned that there are over 2,000 people that are still missing, both civilian and military personnel. Would you share with our viewers that story and what you're trying to get done in relation to that problem?
Well, in 1971, I was sitting in the mess hall in Phan Rang, Vietnam. I sat down to a Thanksgiving dinner and I thought about the POWs. It was an issue on the base because we was losing our pilots. I was a jet mechanic, so Al's made me feel special today, saying that I was a support to his group. You know, I didn't think that I was much important as the ground forces, but Al has made me feel special today that I was able to do my part. And so I went around the base to my friends, and we got 1,200 signatures and sent them to, at that time, President Nixon, and told him we want to go get those men. We knew very well where they were at, some of them. And General Hughes sent me back a nice little letter stating, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. You just do your job. We'll take care of it. And here we are years later. And so there was a period of time that I wasn't active, and then a few years back I thought of the parades, and we need some, like Al says, we need to let the people know what happened. So I started in with the VFW parades, and then this last year I put the MIA POW trailer on the back. I have a cage on there with a mannequin in there, and that represents somebody that's still missing. Now, we don't have any idea where they're at. We'd like to think some of them are still alive, but at least we want to know. And Hanoi, as you know, is blackmailing us. They want that $3.25 billion that Nixon said he was going to give them to redo their land and reneged on. They want that money, and they're not going to give up too many remains until they see some recognition from us. And I think we're being blackmailed, and I think the public ought to know it and do something about it.
And so you're not optimistic about an answer unless they get what they ask for?
That's right. I do feel that there could be some alive over there. One gentleman today brought it to my attention. He said it would be a good insurance policy if they have kept some of these men in good shape, that they could present them to us, say, tomorrow, and say, here they are, your men. now I want some action. What do you think the American public would do? There'd be no amount of money that would stop getting those men back, especially alive ones. But we want the remains also.
So that point is interesting and important, and it's because the fact they're not doing that makes it more bleak that there are people alive.
Yes.
Or they would probably use that method. Linda, I want to return to you for a minute and talk about the role of women in our military forces. And in this country, one thing that's been so important in all our walk of our life that we be one people, and that the women and men of our society work together. And I think many people who are not close to the armed forces don't understand that women have had a very major role to play. And would you share a little more from your experiences and your daughter's experiences, the changes that come to the military forces and the role of women?
Well, when I went in the Air Force, I was 24 years old, and some of the jobs that had never been open to women before were just opening up. As a matter of fact, I was heavy equipment operator when I started in the service. I don't know if all the jobs they've opened up women should take, because with the experiences I've had, I mean, I love my job. It was all outside work and everything, but a woman shouldn't be doing that, honestly. But everything's open up now. They can be the pilots, they're on the ships, and the next step is they're going to send them into combat, which in other countries they already have their women in combat. I don't see any difference. If I had to do it all over again, knowing still what I know now today, I'd do it again. If they called me up tomorrow and asked me to come serve again, wheelchair and all, I'd do it. I love my country. I love the people.
I get that very clear from all of you, that you have a real commitment to what you've done and to your country and what you believe in. John, I know that you've had experience too in Vietnam. I believe you were in the Navy.
Yes, sir.
And John, would you share a little bit with us too about, I think this is what Jerry was sharing with Al too, that one of the healthy things about a program like this and today and our honoring veterans is they get to communicate with one another. That some of you don't realize that you had a kind of support that you had. I know you've mentioned to me that you had some ideas about being on the ship. You know, how much support were you giving? Would you share those thoughts?
Surely. Being separated from land-based forces, we had a tendency of feeling by ourselves, that actually nothing was going on. Being on a 8-inch guided missile cruiser, which was the biggest thing before the New Jersey came up, we could sit out as far as we want. If there was a hit to be made on shore, we could be 20 miles out and lob around in and never come close. However, we were approximately 1,000 yards from the beach and throwing artillery in 20 miles inland, not knowing what we were hitting until usually the next day when the captain would tell us what we hit. But we realized that we were supporting somebody, although we couldn't see them or know exactly where they were at to some extent. And being that close to the beach, it gave us an atmosphere, and not being shot back at, an atmosphere of that there really was not a full-blown type war going on, that we were out there basically shelling an island or shelling shore. On one side we would be broadsiding with 5-inch, 3-inch and 8-inch ammunition, and on the other side the cooks would have 55-gallon barrels cut in half with barbecues. On the other side we'd be barbecuing. And it hit me that one day, I thought, what's going on here? We're supposed to be fighting and defending something. Why are we doing that over here, and yet 50 feet on the other side of the ship we're partying? It didn't make any sense to me. There we were making the best of a bad situation, the only way we could, being out and not being able to get into any kind of a port for 30, 40 days at a time. I'm very happy and glad that we had some people on shore to defend ourselves, because we were shot back at one point, and we took a hit. that was very surprising, because we thought we were invincible. And it woke us up real quick that we were flesh and blood just like anybody else is on shore, and we could disappear real quick. We supported not only with shore fire, but we kept the gun runners from running guns back and forth beyond the DMZ and bring them inland. We sank quite a few boats out there that were running guns and ammunition to some of the villagers. And that was one of our main programs. And we knew that if they got through, what would happen to our ground forces. So we were made aware at that point in time, the 2 years that I had been there, between 66 and 68.
Thank you. Clifford, I want to go back, because there's something about World War II, too, that all wars are different, or all circumstances are different. But today you were sharing with us about when a country is so controlled as Hitler controlled Germany. And I know there's different theories on this, but you shared a story about, as you went in, and there were towns or villages nearby the concentration camps, that the control was so great that the people didn't even know about that. There's a lesson to be learned here too about, in a democracy, never allowing the censorship or control of information to where you don't have control of what's going on with your government. But would you share some of the experience you had? Did the people literally not know what was going on that close by?
I think that a good share of the German people never really realized what was taking place. And as I shared this morning, basically, like in the city of Dachau, at the very heart of the concentration area, the people were not aware of what was being done. And we decided that we would inform the natives of the area what was happening. So we loaded up dead bodies, put them on trucks, drove through the area, and the German people looked at us, and then they would send word back that was propaganda, that did not exist. Most of these people were never allowed out of the immediate areas of their homes or their villages. So they did not know what was going on.
They just mentally couldn't accept or couldn't accept. It's another form of shock in the traumatic experience. I wish we could continue our program. I know you have a lot of things you'd like to say. I've got the signal that our time is up. But as we close the program, I want to again, to all 5 of you and to the others that were with us this morning and the others that live in our area, that we honor you. We want to do that every year. And we owe you a lot for what you've done for this country.
Thank you.
And I thank all 5 of you for being on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our program, and that you too will take time out each year to honor our veterans, because I think these 5 veterans have made it very clear what it's all about and how very serious and important it is. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, when we will discuss an important subject. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.